Hey, how's it going? Jen, James?
Hey, guys. I just gave you presenter rights. Brian.
Hey, Joe.
Hello. You know, Joe, you make us envious every time with that backdrop.
Yep.
Why don't you retire? Why don't you retire?
It's that easy.
When I make the decisions that you do. Okay, let's hope I get there.
Where do I find the role? We need one more person with the 7.
I just texted Carl and Rich Viscay to see if either of them are jumping on.
Perfect. Yeah, I know
Well,
they
there's
had.
Carl.
There's Carl. All right. Yay, we got the 7. I know Susan is going to be a couple of minutes late.
So just in the interest of everybody's time, I'm gonna step in for her and call the meeting to order.
Perfect.
If we could do a roll call.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. I'll start with the people that I know we see at least. Mike Picardi.
Here.
Mayor Arrigo. Don't see him. Stacy Rizzo.
Here.
And I know Susan had emailed that she was going to be late, so I'm going to mark her as absent for now. Dr. Kelly,
Here.
Carl Swenson,
Here.
Jennifer Hayes. Rich Biscay
Here.
and Don Sharmella
Here.
and Nick Rystrom,
Here.
Jerry Visconti,
Here.
and I don't see Patrick Keith.
Nope.
Oh, okay. So first order of business before we jump into the scorecards, if we could just have a motion to approve meeting minutes from our last meeting, which would be
Motion
the
to approve.
Stacy made the motion,
Second.
second by Nick Rystrom. And we'll do a quick roll call on that for Mike Picardi.
Yes.
Like Jack in the Box. Mayor Arrigo is absent. Stacy
Yes.
and Susan has not arrived yet. Dr. Kelly
Yes.
and Carl Swenson
Yes.
is absent. Jennifer Hayes,
Yes.
you. Rich Biscay,
Yes.
Don Sharmella.
Yes.
Thank you. Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jared Visconti,
Yes.
and Patrick Keith is not here. Okay, with that, that takes care of the housekeeping items. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bacon to start talking scorecards.
Excellent. Thanks, Linda. So real quick, we have 11 scorecards. The only ones I don't have are Mayor Rigo and Mr. Keefe. So what I would like to do, apologies, I only sent the email out 40 minutes ago, but I think it would be really helpful for all of us, those on the committee and those of us consultants, if we could go through really quick each of the scorecards you've submitted to me. I've got and input them all on one spreadsheet. I've highlighted the top 2, 3, 4 options for each person, and I think it would be great if you could each spend 30 seconds, a minute, just telling us how you arrived at your decision. That'll also buy us a little time to see if Patrick or Mayor Rigo can make it and get a scorecard submitted before we jump out to the summary and move forward. So if that's all right, I have the spreadsheet with all your scores in there, and it's just alphabetical by last name. I don't know if anybody wants to start off, or if it's okay with me just sort of calling on you and you giving us your 2 cents on why you scored it the way you scored it.
Brian, did you say that you sent us that spreadsheet?
I have not sent this spreadsheet. I was waiting, hoping we were going to get all 13 scores. I could email it right now if that's helpful to people. I can save it and email it.
That would be helpful.
Yep, let me do that right now before I share the screen. 1 second. Just give me 1 minute. I'm going to reply to everyone on the invite. That's probably the quickest way for me to do it. Actually, I literally just got the mayor's scoring as well. So if you give me 1 second here, I'll drop that in before I send it along.
Don't throw the mayor under the bus, Brian. Saying he's late.
He's not late until there's a motion.
Let's say you just found the mayors.
I just found it. Yes, it was buried in my inbox.
That's better. Better.
Let's see. Let me jump in here. Okay, and is that 12?
And just while Brian's doing that, I want to recognize that Susan Gravelisi has joined.
Okay, that email is going out now. I just click send. So let me share my screen. Does anyone want to go first? I want me to go alphabetical by last name, which would again put Mr. Mayor on the spot here. Although I don't think he's in the meeting. I don't think he's arrived. So we'd probably default to Stacy. I'm going to share my screen.
Rizzo begins with R.
I had it under B. Sorry.
Oh. Why did I choose the way I chose? I think first and foremost was how much I wanted it to be centralized in the city. That was my main concern. Well, not my main concern, but one of the largest concerns, to make sure that those who do not drive, there was MBTA accessible. The other reasons probably would be my wish for what everything we could put in this new building. So of course I like bigger the better, so that we could incorporate everything that we would love to incorporate. And I know eminent domain should be a concern to me because of friends and family, but I didn't make that a priority. And I do apologize to anyone out there, but so long and short of it, getting everything in the school that we possibly can and making sure it was centralized.
Excellent. Thank you, Stacy. And just as a quick note, I just jumped in and highlighted. You can see some on each of these. There's a few highlighted in green. I just picked up the top 3, top 4, top 5. If it was close sometimes, that doesn't really mean anything. It's just a visual cue to sort of highlight which ones people preferred. So, Dawn, do you mind giving us your 2 cents? Your scorecards on the screen. I think Dawn's here.
Yeah, just so you know.
Building.
Oh, there he is.
I'm outside the building and I'm going to be losing kind of connection here.
Okay.
So, I mean, the existing sites very limited to what to the constraints put on you by the size of the site.
I think we are losing you, Dawn.
I think we can move on to the next.
Yeah, I think we'll move on to Dawn. If we get a better cell connection, we'll come back to you at the end. Susan.
We can't hear you, Susan. I don't know why. It says it's green, but don't hear your voice.
Yep. Not yet.
We'll skip over you and go to Jen Hayes next. Nobody else have any technical issues?
Yep, Susan.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
here you go.
I think I had, because I had my headset on before and I think it was still on that side. Central location was a big point for me. Obviously having it where it was more accessible for everyone in the city from North Revere to Beachmont. The timeline had a lot to do with me as far as how far this project would be pushed out at some of the other sites. So that was a big consideration for me. Eminent domain is something that, I'm really not in favor of. Displacing, just say 85 homes at the existing site. To me, with there being a housing shortage right now in America, to displace 85 homes to me was a big factor. And the relocation costs, if it were at the housing authority, just to rebuild and relocate elderly, disabled, low-income families, to me was a big factor.
Jen Hayes?
Very similar. I wasn't really a big fan of so much eminent domain. I really do like that the school would be larger. We might have more facilities, but also, I don't know, it would be a lot longer. And I kind of want the high school to be built a bit sooner from someone who teaches at the high school. So timeline was a factor. Also, I feel like the school, like the existing site, a lot of kids and families already know like where it is. I like the location. For someone who lives in Revere, for me to travel there, there's not a lot of traffic. But I feel like if I had to go to Wonderland or to Beachmont, it would be worse for traffic wise. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jennifer. We'll jump to Dr. Kelly.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to start off by saying that I was somewhat surprised by the results. I tried to really just look at each location individually and assign values to the metrics that were there without really paying attention to where each one was located. And so I was really surprised to see how highly Furlong Drive scored for me. So I just, I wanted to put that out there. And the other one that somewhat surprised me was a new building at the existing site that involves dropping the current building, because that's something that I've been vocally saying is going to be a hindrance to the school department, just because we really wanted to try to reduce class size K through 12 by the creation of a new building, and that wouldn't be feasible under Project 1C, but that still scored very highly for me on the metrics that we had agreed to measure on. So I guess that's about it. Not surprising to me, the housing authority site, especially the one where we get the whole property, scored highly for me. And I will say that I was cognizant of the timeline for that, and actually went into filling this out thinking, oh, there's no way we can do the housing authority site because it's just too far away. It's too long from now. So I was surprised that when stacking all the metrics, it still weighed out this way.
And just to jump in on that quickly, Superintendent Kelly and the committee, I think it does, we'll get to the summary sheet in a bit, but it seems like we're definitely going to be having a housing authority option or options move along. And I think we're going to probably have to front load the next phase, the next few months, to really hammer home some of the procedural items, including getting the MSBA's take on the timeline and everything. So I'm not throwing it out there as a big worry or anything, but in terms of our next steps, really hammering home what's the sequence, when would it happen, will be a big deal to be able to pick the final option from the handful that we're going to narrow down to today. John Perella.
John wasn't able to make it. He had a conflicting meeting.
John's not here, and I've just noted I skipped Patrick. I don't think Patrick is here. Just checking again. Nope. Michael Picardi.
Okay. So just to let you guys know, if I sound ridiculous, I just had some dental work done, so let you kind of half numb on my left side. So I am also, like Dr. Kelly, very surprised at my results. I'm not surprised at the 1C because I was kind of leaning towards that way anyways. I am surprised with the housing authority because I was someone that am very much for getting this done sooner than later. and then the whole waiting of 7, 8, 9 years possibly, I just think isn't feasible for the current school that we have and the amount of children that are going to be going into that school in the next 4 to 5 years. I'm also not surprised to see that everyone's scores kind of differ, because Brian and I talked about this yesterday. There's no number one pick, like obvious answer. So I focus more on central location, which I thought the new existing high school was, and also played down the eminent domain highly also. So that's all.
Thank you, Michael. How about Nick?
So the way I evaluated it was, one, I went across and evaluated each one of the sites for the same criteria, and I didn't look at the totals at all until the end. And so I just ranked each one in comparison, and then this is how it shook out. I think that the reasons that the Wonderland one, was sort of at the top, I think, is because it, the advantage of that, I think, is kind of the clean slate sort of approach. A lot of the other ones have some other things going on in terms of eminent domain or displacement of other buildings, and then there's some other issues, I think, with the existing property, other hurdles that are there. So I think that's why it came out the way it did. But like I said, I ranked them all. I went through and I ranked them, against each other, and this is the way it shook out. And I'm surprised a little bit, but not surprised in other respects. So I think that that's the way it happened.
Thank you, Nick. But Carl.
Okay. Yeah, I feel the same way. I took a real individual approach to each line item based on the topic. And I think I was surprised. I think Amber was surprised at my score, because I think she knows. I think she actually wanted me to change them. But it was an honest assessment of each line item. And I think each line item certainly pushes you to give high scores on schools that are areas that you don't particularly have a favor for, based on their location or proximity to wetlands, or just the way the question prompts itself. There's certain ones that it's going to prompt a 4 or prompt a 1 based on the option and what it's asking you. So my scores do not reflect how I feel about the site, but I do think it's a good first step. And I think once we narrow down some sites, maybe a similar scorecard could be developed based on our closed out selections a little bit, and maybe we start to break it down a little more with some different topics. Because like I said, you go line by line, you're gonna have to score certain areas high in project areas that you're not in favor of. So my scores are my scores, but that certainly doesn't reflect the site that I would be most favorable of.
Got it, Carl. And I'd quickly add into that too, that the options that are going to move on, I think there's going to be a lot more tangible examples of how that building would shake out in the next handful of months, as opposed to the PDP phase we're finishing up on now. So this, we might tear up this scorecard, do something totally different over the next 4 or 5 months to find our way from 4 or 5 options down to 1. And I completely hear what you're saying. I think a lot of this right now is we're comparing very generally project to project, building to building, and that's going to become a lot more specific for each site in the coming months. I think that'll help the committee and help us establish a more detailed way of ranking the options over the course of the summer.
Okay.
How about Rich?
Sure. I approach it. It sounds like similar to Nick Rystrom, where I didn't have any sum on the bottom. I just scored them as I felt they needed to be scored, and then just ran a sum total across the bottom. And I think it's somewhat relevant to what I feel is some of the more logical choices. But definitely seem like some of the ease of using existing site and such tend to come out on my end of the math. And I just, like I said, just try to score them. You know, some of them I weren't exactly 100% clear on what we were asking, you know, additional recurring administration costs and such. I wasn't quite sure on some of them, so I just took my best guess and figured that it would all shake out when everybody combines their scores and take out some of those highs and lows. So, but yeah, I just kind of try to do it without thinking about a particular site and just try to answer them across, and this is what I came up with.
Excellent, thanks. And last but not least, Jerry.
Do we have any sand stuff down?
Thank you. You know, in looking at the spreadsheet, I like the fact that there were a couple of things that really, when looking at it, I was kind of surprised that the Wonderland site got a higher number than I expected, only because of the location. But you know, one of my things is the open space area and the footprint of the spaces. You know, the housing authority I think is a centrally located spot, which would be great in giving that big atmosphere of a big campus style footprint, but I don't know if that was reality, you know, and the numbers, when we were going over the numbers, were staggering. I don't know if anybody else felt that way as well, but I'm looking at some of the numbers and what the city would be responsible for and so forth and so on. I was, you know, when we were talking about, I think the ratio was reduced to, you know, 40 or 50%. That was kind of surprising to me, you know, with the payback from the MSBA, if I'm not mistaken. So, but you know, I also like the fact that the existing footprint would be a quicker span in getting this done, but there was that would defeat the purpose of keeping the existing building, which I know that was an option as well. So it was pretty tight. I think those are the numbers and where they panned out. I'm kind of surprised that they were actually pretty tied with the 3A and 1B, to be honest with you, because it's completely two different spots and two different types. So, thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Let me try to go back to Dawn real quick. Dawn, can you hear? You working?
Yeah.
Yep, looks like your
Yes.
mic's on.
So as soon as I left the building, the difference between the Wi-Fi and the wireless. So I mean, the way I scored it was, I think Wonderland is, we have a lot. I mean, Wonderland is a blank canvas for us, and there's just a lot of flexibility. The location, you know, not that great for accessibility. I think the existing site is just, you know, a little too cumbersome. I think the housing site is another blank canvas, but you know, the duration is, you know, that's would be difficult to deal with. And as far as Furlong Drive, I mean, I'm a little less hot on that now, but I still do like the site. But I think Furlong Drive can be you know, still a real contender. It's not ideal, but I think that it's you know, making something that's not so good into something that's really good. But again, you know, going back to Wonderland, I think Wonderland really is, you know, probably the best, you know, the best scenario, and that's about it.
Thank you, Dawn. So real quick on the spreadsheet, I'm going to take this draft note off, and I'm just going to note this red 12 up here is just keeping track of how many votes we have. So if we got the 13th, I would move this to 13. So currently, looking at this, the large housing authority appears to be scoring the highest, followed by the existing new on Ericola Park. And if I'm just looking across the bottom correct here, it appears Housing Authority Medium is next, and Wonderland Large is after that. So before we jump into a discussion about how many to bring into the next phase, and there's no real defined rule to that, we really just do want to narrow it down so that we can get into a lot more detailed analysis, start working some different building plans, etc. I'd like to just see if anyone from the team, either our left field team or Perkins Eastman, just sort of wants to add anything to what they've heard or about some next steps. Putting everybody on the spot today.
I'll say a couple words. Variety is somewhat what I expected. I forget who said it. There's not a clear winner, I think, in anyone's minds as far as, you know, something rising to the top. I think the 4 that are identified here, we can definitely work with. And I don't know, I guess that's all I have to say, but it's interesting to see all the different scores, and I was kind of taking notes on what people found important. So I was glad you did that, Brian. Thank you for putting people on the spot, because it was helpful for us to hear.
Yep, agreed. And I mean, this to me, there's something interesting about, in terms of further study, Housing Authority big versus medium. I think one of the discussions there is going to be, is it a different building plan? And that's something that I think for the Perkins Eastman team and Dawn, we might want to sort of front load. Is that truly 2 options with 2 different buildings, or is it same building with a different site approach? That might allow us to consolidate those into sort of one option that might help us try to optimize the schedule, in that X amount of housing has to be relocated to get us in the ground, and then we can start building. And maybe as more housing comes online, this field can spread out. So I tend to think that unless these are different buildings, and I don't want to put you, Dawn, on the spot to answer that now. I think that's the next handful of weeks, next handful of months. But I would try to, that's the first hurdle to me, is, are they the same building? Because if they're the same building, they're basically the same project that we could maybe phase out as it expands, as more housing comes online.
I'm happy to be put on the spot. As far as how we're viewing it right now, in my mind, they're very similar buildings, and it's the expansion of the site and the amenities on the site that would enhance it from a medium to a large. And that includes everything from streets to fields to walking, you know, the length of any walking and fitness paths, health and wellness paths, and also amount of parking. So, but that's not to say it couldn't be 2 different buildings if the desire was there for us to, and that means like different footprint. Maybe the medium is taller because we have less, if we want apples to apples site amenities, then it would certainly change the footprint and the need to go more vertical. Yep. So it can be studied, absolutely. But just so you know where our thinking has been, that it's mostly been about a different site possibility than a building for now.
Yes, same here. And I think that might even be something that I push, and I want us to find the right answer, but that schedule could be optimized if we approach it as in the medium or little version is just us getting in the ground and being able to do foundations and start building a building, and then sort of expand as the housing comes along. So that might be a way to help those schedules into by the time we're showing you final schedules this fall and we're selecting an option, there's a lot more resolution to those schedules. There's a lot more certainty. But in parallel to that, we'll have to really be working with the city to try to push forward what is the real path towards housing relocation, knowing that it definitely appears to me that this is going to be studied further in PSR.
Brian, I have a question. Would we be looking at different building layouts? Because some may fit some sites better than others and may, help in the determination of which site it goes on as well.
Yeah, I envision that as definitely something that we have to push along during PSRs, getting a little bit beyond the test fits and into, if we are in Arcola Park, I think we have a good idea of what that's going to be. I think Dawn and the team have explained that. I think some of these other options on what we've shown at Wonderland and what we've shown at Housing Authority, I think pushing the floor plans a little bit further beyond what we have here would help the committee, if that's what you're getting at.
And just so you know, we've already been doing that and working towards that. It's just that hasn't been the focus right now because of all these site decisions. So that's already underway and is in the works as far as developing, like, for example, 1C, the footprints changed based on the culvert that exists and some of the site constraints that we've uncovered, as we look deeper into these sites. So we're already working on that and definitely in the plans to continue to move those forward in PSR. So look for that forthcoming.
Excellent.
One thing that, thank you, Don, that we've been talking about in terms of 1C is we, at least the design and OPM side, haven't really heard a true vision for what to do with the existing high school. And we were discussing, we definitely need to have a conversation about that, probably next meeting in July. We've been kicking around on this side, what governs our options there, and we've been looking straight to the code. And Dan Colley just joined, thanks. We sent out an email with a few options, and I guess to sum it up, it's very nuanced, depending on what you want to do with it. And so it could be basically you can get away with doing nothing and moving a whole group in, or you'd have to upgrade the whole building. So depending on what exactly Revere may want to do with that existing school, it has code implications. And I know, not to put Bob on the spot, maybe some DESI implications. We haven't heard that quite yet, but certainly code, we know that it's going to have an impact.
That's going to be an item that I think we put on a middle of July agenda to really just talk about how that building could be reused without a reno, how it could be, how reusing it could trigger a reno, et cetera, and getting really specific about that. Because I mean, any of these, I know the desire on some of these Wonderland and Housing Authority options is to maintain that building. And Dr. Kelly, you've done a great job of letting us know that of why. I think we need to get back in front of you what the impact is. So what could you not do to move kids right in there without a reno? Perhaps use it as a magnet middle. And if you wanted to start tinkering away, doing some reno, at what point would it trigger a full code upgrade? So that's definitely something that we think we got to do a little bit more work on and put it back in front of you folks to really hone in on what the plan is for each of these options that make it into the PSR. And just to go acronyms here for a second, consider the PSR the next 4 or 5 or 6 months. We're finishing the PDP, the preliminary design program. This meeting and next meeting are the culmination of the preliminary design program that'll be submitted to the MSBA, and we'll move into the preferred schematic report, PSR. And those next 4 or 5 months are what's going to take these, whatever options we move along today, make them all a lot more specific, work on the schedules, do some more cost estimating, and come up with a different way to then rank these options to arrive at a single option this fall. And that single option is the one that we'll be moving into schematic design, SD, you might hear us call it, next year.
And I think one thing we'd be looking for homework from this committee is because the code is so complex and formulaic, we'd be requesting from you to think about and let us know what you want to do with that existing building. Then we can run it through. And Dan or Bob, tell me if I'm off, but we'll run it through the code and the scenarios, and then we can present that to you. But we don't. But you know, it'd be we have limitless options, but we'd ask you to help us narrow down what you'd like to do with that existing building.
So to bring it into the real goal of today, I mean, I highlighted the top 4 here, and the decision, I do think option 3A and 3B probably should both move on, but they might consolidate into more of a plan of putting the building in and then growing the site, like I mentioned before. That's definitely something. They could be maintained in coming meetings as separate options, but the question that we need to answer today is, are these the 4? Or do we, I'm not positive there's really a huge benefit to bringing in the Housing Authority small option, which would be the next one in the ranking order here, because I think we can study what we need to in terms of getting a building in there and then expanding the site, or just waiting for the whole site to be available between these options. But if we cut it off there, I think the piece for the record is it looks like we're moving on from furlong. We're moving on from a base repair, which always comes out at the bottom. Nobody wants to do that. I mean, none of our clients want to do that, not just this committee. And it looks like we're moving on from the ideas of eminent domain at the existing site. So I think that's the point to focus on now is do we draw the line at these 4, understanding that we can further study small housing authority growing over time as housing becomes available as part of these 2 options.
Brian, can I ask a question? 1 or 2 people mentioned that they sort of did this by the numbers, but perhaps it did not reflect the site they really favored. So I would just offer up, if somebody doesn't see if you just asked them which site they really wanted, if it didn't show up, do they want to at least discuss that?
Yep, that's a good point. Anyone's free to throw in their 2 cents there. The benefit of these 4 is we still have all 3 sites on the table, I guess. So if nobody has any follow-up or input on that, I think the question becomes, are these the 4? And if these are the 4, we would look for a motion to move these 4 along. It's fine if it's not these 4, but we should have that discussion now.
I'm not sure if it's helpful, but I didn't do the sort of numerical cumulative run that you did, but what I did do was circle the common denominators from people's top 3 or 4, and I basically got the same list that you've got with the thought that maybe next in line would be 3B or 2B, but you know, just looking at it that way, what were the ones that kept popping up in the top 3 or 4? It's really the same list. The other thing I'll add is just to remind everybody that we do need to do 1A. It's a requirement of the MSBA. We'll have to take that one forward.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that reminder, Bob. I would have forgot that, and we need that in the motion. That is a requirement of the MSBA to keep an ad reno moved forward for further study. So I think you make a good point too, that in a way Wonderland small and Housing Authority small can be covered in figuring out the schedule and the layout for these sites. Similar to what I explained on Housing Authority, maybe we take over enough space to get the building going, which is really the duration we need, the time driver. We could do the same approach here. We could approach this as get the building going, figure out if the city's going to put anything back over in this corner. We have heard about potentially a commuter rail stop, et cetera, and then figure out exactly what field space is left. So I tend to think that there's no harm in dropping off 2B or 3C, because I think those concepts can be studied as part of 2A and 3A and 3B. So I am going to unhighlight these small ones and highlight this option. And again, thank you, Bob, because if we forgot that, we would have been doing this motion again next week.
So very much.
So at that point, I'll make a motion to approve options 1A, 1C, 2A, 3A, 3B, to further study the preferred schematic report phase.
Second,
I'm sorry, who seconded that? Was that Susan?
Susan, yes.
Thank you. All right, Brian, I'm going to do a quick roll call on this vote then, with starting with Mike Picardi.
Can I ask one question before we vote on this?
I was just going to say, I know you tried to say something earlier.
I have a question as well. This is Rich Viskey.
Sure.
After you, Michael.
Thanks. I guess it's going to be more directed towards Dr. Kelly. If we do go with the Housing Authority site, and that pushes our timeline out, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, I guess, is that going to have an impact on the current high school as far as population of the high school and additional costs like, who knows, like adding trailers in the backyard because we can't put the kids in the school? Are those costs real? Have they been added into the costs that we already have reflected in their spreadsheet?
I don't think that those costs are included, but they're not wildly prohibitive. We're actually looking into that option right now in order to create more classroom space for next year. So that's something we're going to be looking at over the summer. But you know, I think that to Brian's point, if it were to come out that the Housing Authority site is the one that we're going to use, we might be able to expeditiously create a space there and create enough relocation housing in 3 or 4 years, or even less than that, while we're still going through this design phase, for the small portion to become available so that we could build the building and get going on that, and then have an expansion to a larger footprint be a secondary part of that job that would come after that. So it might not be the case that, you know, if we said we want to use the whole area of the Housing Authority site and we're not going to put a shovel in the ground until every single person who currently lives there is relocated, that would be a much longer wait time, right? But if we looked at it as we need to move this portion in this smaller area, those folks could probably be relocated a lot more quickly. But we're definitely bursting at the seams at the high school. There's no two ways about it. And so doing something like having portable classrooms like we had at the Hill School back when it was the McKinley, or doing something like that is probably in our near future, regardless of how this project times out.
Brian,
So
this is
either way, really.
Did you show when you did your comparative costs, did you show 3 or 4 more years of escalation? Because that's going to be one of your biggest, obviously, drivers.
Yeah, and that's what threading the needle on this schedule as we look at the Housing Authority more. I really think what we're going to focus on is getting a buildable footprint for the building, and because that might be something that's doable in the next 2 years, and that would drive the escalation. Right now, the escalation's driven out a number of years, Jim.
Yeah, that sounds like really threading a needle, what you're trying to accomplish there.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I think we're going to front load some Housing Authority, sort of make it more defined than it is now from a protocol point of view. What exactly would the footprint be? What houses, how much construction space around that we need to at least get the building going? That will take a little bit of a schedule and a money penalty away from this if we don't have to assume we need to wait 5 years to just be able to do it all in one swoop. But it would be threading a needle, but there is a concept there to get the small version of it and work outwards as time allows. And maybe it's a 2 or 3 or 4 phase project over a period of time. But the key is that the building gets there as fast as possible.
Yeah. The point I wanted to make while you're talking about the Housing Authority is what additional complications are there in assuming that we can take over the whole area where the largest area has federal housing, not just state housing. So I don't know what the additional hurdles are. My scorecard didn't really reflect that per se, but you know, just maybe some additional hurdles that may not be worth going for the largest portion versus the only state-funded housing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that's part of the next steps. I think we've stayed off some of the federal units in most of these schemes, but getting even more literal about that is what we're going to have to do. And maybe it never quite get to be the entire site footprint, but it gets close to it somehow. Or maybe we work in and around units in a different way with the expanded site work.
Yeah, it looks like the largest one scored higher though, so it doesn't reflect those hurdles on the scorecard anyway. So just something to consider, because it's probably a whole nother list of hurdles to get over to take over federal.
Yep, and I'd add that I'm going to I have the mayor and Mr. Bob O'Brien's ear for a little bit on Monday, and we were sort of waiting for Monday to just see what we got, the list that we got this narrowed down to. I'm gonna talk to them on Monday. I think I might be asking this building committee at next week's meeting to make some type of motion to request the city reach out to the housing authority and formally begin this process. I think that probably should be a motion from this committee so there's a official on the record. We've moved this option on, and the committee is asking the city to formally start looking into this process, because we're never going to be able to get to a real schedule and a real plan unless we start doing some outreach in the coming months to find out the process.
To further that point, Brian, right? What we were discussing was the relocation project is going to be a completely separate project, and as this is public, unless there may be some public-private partnership, but if it isn't, then it's going to have to go through the same kind of process. They're going to have to find an OPM, then find a designer, and then finally get to construction. So all of this is going to have to happen, and built before our project can continue on, at least, until we get a hold of the land.
Yep. That'll be a huge part of the next phase, the next 5-6 months of figuring out these options, is what exactly is the sequence. That's going to include outreach. When exactly are some group of us, project people, when I say us, meeting with the housing authority? What is the appropriate way to do that? What's the appropriate way to get word out, et cetera? So we're going to have to dive into all that this summer.
Yeah, but I guess
That's probably a political conversation first, than a project conversation.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? There is a motion on the table. If not, I think we could do the roll call.
We'll start over with Mike McCarty.
Say yes.
Okay. And Stacy Rizzo.
Yes.
Susan Gravellisi.
Yes.
And Dr. Kelly.
Yes.
Carl Swenson.
Yes.
And Jennifer Hayes.
Yes.
Rich Viscay.
Yes.
Don Chermella.
Yes.
Nick Rystrom.
Yes.
Jerry Visconti.
Yes.
And that is it. That concludes the roll call, and the motion has been accepted.
Excellent. I think, Linda, that was all the business we needed to cover today.
I believe so. If there's nothing else, I see a couple of phone numbers on here, so I'd like to see if there's any public comments. Amber, I can see you talking, but I don't hear you.
She's trying to correct Carl's scorecard again. I'm sorry, Carl.
Give her credit for trying.
Yeah, no, she tries. She does.
Other instances, I may have taken her up on that.
Yep. Stand your ground.
Amber, if you speak loudly, I can hear you, and then I can relay the question.
Amber, also, if you want to come in here, you can do that as well.
Otherwise, we'd have to revert back to sticky notes.
Hi, sorry, I just have a quick question. Has this committee or any of the project managers or even the architects ever heard of MSBA approving or prolonging a project to be able to procure properties, say, for this amount of time? I mean, is it going to affect our spending power as far as what they're going to approve for the building?
The quick answer, and I'll defer to Jim and Lynn and the other left field team to expand on it, I think, is that I don't know of a direct precedent. However, many MSBA projects do fall behind their initial schedule and sometimes have baggage that takes a year or two to figure out. The MSBA won't kick you out for that. We are going to be submitting this report, this preliminary design report, and we're going to get input back from them. They're going to see some of those schedules, and I think they're going to ask some questions that we will find out a real answer to your question, Amber. I think what's likely, and I'm not speaking for the MSBA, I want to put that disclaimer out there. They make their own decisions, but I think it's likely that they would allow these housing authority or eminent domain at Wonderland to move forward. I think there's a chance that they wouldn't reimburse on it, and we might be doing the design work with the city paying for it until the other housing project is done and we have control of the land. I have a feeling that's the way it might go, in that you get your reimbursement later than you would have. So
That's the way that Waltham went. It took them over 2 years to get through their eminent domain process, and the city had to fund the design portion of it until they had clear title to the land and clear control of the land, meaning before they would do any reimbursements or even sign the project funding agreement.
I was just going to say that was the case in Lowell. They won't let you sign a PFA, a project funding agreement, until you have the land, which is what I think I remember happened in Lowell. So that was kind of the critical piece in order to then be able to sign the project funding agreement. So,
so that's at the go ahead, Don, sorry.
Just for everyone that isn't as familiar, that's at the end of schematic design once you have the borrowing capacity, if you want to, however that is. In towns, it's town meeting, approval, and a city, it's however that plays out is what I'm
correct.
trying to say.
They would allow, we would go through the same process. We think they would allow it, but instead of every month doing the invoices, sending the invoices in and getting reimbursement back, since they probably wouldn't execute a project funding agreement, when we're in that post-schematic design, pre-construction, we're waiting for a housing project to happen, our activities then would basically be borne by the city, borne by the project, and once all of that succeeded and we had control of the land, we could execute a project funding agreement and get reimbursement on the work we'd done for date, would have done to date. So they should allow it, but I think it means there's a section of this where the city is doing the design work and following through on the design work without reimbursement. That reimbursement would come later after successful execution of our housing relocation plan and the project funding agreement.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I think Mr. Ralph Chico, if I'm not butchering his name completely.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I just have one quick question. With the housing authority options, do we have a best and worst case scenario? How many residents would be relocated?
Yes, so I'm gonna round them off, but I think these two options are, the medium option was around, I think 250, and I think the large option was more upwards of 370. I do have those on another presentation. I could check those real numbers.
Okay, thank you.
I'll email that around. I'll check them after the meeting and Otherwise, we're going to be looking to meet next Thursday. The team and us are going to be assembling the PDP. It's going to be a large, probably 1,000+ page document of all the work done to date, a lot of this pricing stuff, schedules, narratives, all of the good work that the school and Bob's team did with educational visioning, space plan. All of this gets packaged up. We'll be meeting next week to have the committee approve submission of the PDP to MSBA. And I think we'll also do a little bit of a look ahead on the big topics that we have to cover in July and the coming months to really get where we need to be this fall, and have you folks in a position where you can clearly pick one of these 5 options, or one of the knowing that the ad reno is automatically in there, even though it didn't score high here. So I think the ad reno options are going to really have to impress you, or you're going to have to learn something you didn't know for that ad reno to get traction. But it is required to be moved into the next phase for further study. Otherwise, I think that's it.
Do we have a time for next week's meeting? Because it's been changed, so.
That's a good point.
I believe next week we go back to the 5:30. It was just this meeting and last week's meeting that went to noontime because of the budget hearings that are happening at night that so many of us have to be part of.
Exactly. I'll be sending out a meeting note, but yes, I was assuming it would be for 5:30 again.
Mr. Dakin, can I just elaborate one more question on that? I lost my internet. I froze for a minute. When you get those numbers, would you possibly be able to let, not me know or anyone know, how many of those residents that could be relocated are disabled residents?
Yeah, well, we can fully break down that number.
One thing that I want to point out, I know this is the first time that we've had public comment at one of these school building committee meetings. It is meant to be a time for members of the public to make a comment or weigh in, not necessarily to question the committee or the design team or the OPM. So Ralph, we can definitely get you that information, but I just want to make sure that we are all understanding the purpose and the role of public comment going forward, because it could be
that's fine. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. But one thing that I'd like to state, when any of these design buildings, there really should be somebody from the Commission on Disability on any of these projects. In any city that does projects like this, there really should be representative from somebody from the Disability Commission. Whether that does not have to be myself, but there really needs to somebody be involved with this aspect. So I'm just going to that's just a comment that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you. Do we have any motion to dismiss if there were no other questions?
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Excellent.
Second.
Excellent. All right. We'll do a quick roll call to adjourn today's meeting. Mike Picardi?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
And Susan?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly?
Yes.
Carl Svensson?
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes?
Yes.
Actually, he just texted that he had to jump off, so I'm gonna note him as temporarily absent for now. John Scarmella? John, can you hear us?
His message says he's offline. I don't understand that, but I'm like, it says, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna note him as absent as well then for now. Nick Rystrom?
Yes.
And Jarvis Chauncey?
Yes.
And Patrick Keith is also absent. So we do have the motion to adjourn approved. And thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you.